So, what really makes an entrepreneur tick? Is it some kind of special magic, or is it a mindset and a method that maybe anyone can learn? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and break down the playbook, turning some pretty complex ideas into a clear, actionable guide. All right, let's get right into it.
You know, this quote really gets to the heart of it. We tend to think of entrepreneurs as just people who start companies, but the role is so much bigger. They are the engines of progress, the ones who see the world not just for what it is, but for what it could be. They don't just participate in the economy, they're the ones actively shaping it.
So, agents of change. Sounds cool, right? But what does that actually mean? In this first part, we're going to get into the DNA of an entrepreneur, moving past all the buzzwords to understand who they really are.
At its core, you can pretty much boil entrepreneurship down to this simple but really powerful formula. An entrepreneur is, first, a problem solver who spots a need. Then, they're an innovator who comes up with a new solution. And finally, they're a risk taker who's actually willing to act on that solution even when the outcome is uncertain. It's that mix of all three that creates real change.
Let's make that real for a second. Think about the last time you were frustrated by some little daily hassle. Where most of us might just complain, an entrepreneur sees an opportunity. Those long lines for lunch, that becomes the spark for a food delivery app. It's all about connecting the dots from problem to solution.
So what kind of person thinks like this? Well, research points to a few key psychological traits. They're driven by a really clear vision and have a high need to achieve it. Crucially, they believe they're in control of their own destiny. It's not about luck. And while we call them risk takers, they aren't just gamblers. They take calculated, moderate risks and are surprisingly comfortable making decisions when the path ahead isn't perfectly clear.
And this brings us to a really fascinating topic, the entrepreneurial mindset. See, it's not just about what they do. It's all about how they think. And it's fundamentally different from the way a more traditional manager might think.
Okay, now this slide is super important. Most of us are taught what's called causal thinking. You set a goal, then you go find the money, the people, and the tools to make it happen. But entrepreneurs often use something different, called effectuation. They start with what they already have, their skills, their knowledge, their network, and they ask, okay, given what I've got right now, what can I create? It's a total flip of the script.
And here's a perfect way to think about it. The causal thinker says, I want to open a restaurant, so I need to go find $1 million. The effectuation thinker says, well, I can cook, I have a kitchen, and I know a ton of hungry students. I'll start a lunchbox service and see where it goes. It's all about starting with your means, not just your big, lofty ends.
So, if you're starting with what you've got, how do you figure out which path to take? This is where a key entrepreneurial superpower comes in, spotting the opportunities that pretty much everyone else misses.
You know, it's never just about a good idea floating around in space. Real success happens right here, at this intersection, when the right person with the right skills and mindset collides with the right opportunity at exactly the right time. It's all about that perfect overlap.
This is a fantastic example of using information differently. Two people can see the exact same thing, a long line, but process it in completely different ways. One person just sees a fact. It's busy. The other sees a signal of an unmet need. They don't just see the what. Their brain immediately jumps to what if.
There's actually a name for this, a framework called signal detection theory. It basically breaks down a judgment call into 4 possible outcomes. It helps us understand how an entrepreneur decides if a signal they're seeing, like that long coffee line, is a genuine opportunity to act on, or if it's just, noise.
So, let's run through this really quick. A hit is correctly spotting a real opportunity, like the market for short-form video. A miss is failing to see an opportunity that was right there, like ignoring early AI. A false alarm is chasing something that wasn't real, like thinking 3D TVs were the future. And a correct rejection is rightly deciding not to pursue a bad idea. Great entrepreneurs get really good at maximizing those hits.
Okay, so you've got the mindset, you've spotted a potential opportunity, now what? A great idea is just the starting point. You can't run a business on passion alone. Now we have to look at the structured process for turning that idea into a real, viable plan.
This journey from an idea to an actual enterprise isn't chaos. It's a process. As this table shows, it usually flows through 4 key stages. First, you identify and really evaluate the opportunity. Then, you develop a solid business plan. After that, you've got to get the resources you need. And finally, you manage and grow the whole thing. Each stage builds on the one before it.
You know, a crucial piece of this is timing. When you're evaluating an opportunity, you have to think about the window of opportunity. This is that critical, specific time period where your idea is actually viable. If you're too early, the market isn't ready, too late, and it's already full of competitors. Finding and acting inside that window is absolutely key.
And this is where the business plan comes in. And look, it's not just some boring document you write for investors. It's your strategic roadmap. It forces you to think through every single part of the venture, from your marketing to your financials, and it turns a fuzzy idea into a strategy you can actually follow.
All right, in our final section, let's connect all these dots, the person, the mindset, the plan, to the really big picture, the massive impact that entrepreneurs have on the world through innovation.
The famous economist Joseph Schumpeter had this great way of looking at innovation as part of a three-stage flow. As you can see here, it starts with an invention, which then can lead to an innovation and often ends in imitation. Let's break down what each of those actually means.
So an invention is just the creation of a new idea or a new product. Think of the very first smartphone. Innovation, though, is the process of successfully bringing that invention to the market and turning it into a commercial success. And imitation, well, that's when other companies see that success and follow along, creating their own versions.
And this right here, this is one of the most important takeaways. An invention sitting in the lab doesn't change the world. It's the entrepreneur who acts as the linchpin, the connector, taking that raw invention and turning it into a market-changing innovation that people can actually use. They are the bridge from idea to impact. And that impact is enormous. Entrepreneurs introduce the new products and services that we all come to rely on. They can open up completely new markets we never even knew we needed. They're a massive source of job creation, and by doing all of this, they give a powerful boost to the entire economy.
So, we've covered the formula, the mindset, the process, and the impact. And this brings us to one final thought. Now that you understand the playbook, what problem have you been complaining about? What signal have you maybe been ignoring? What opportunity is out there right now just waiting for you to see it?